So joining me today is Jill Satterfield. Jill is an international mindfulness and meditation teacher. Her integration of embodied mindfulness and meditation includes somatic practices and contemplative psychology, along with 35 years of Buddhist practice and retreats. Jill leads applied embodied mindfulness trainings at UCLA's Mindfulness Awareness Research Center, was a founding faculty member of Spirit Rock Meditation Center's Mindful Yoga and Meditation Teacher Training, and is a mentor for Jack Cornfield and Tara Brach's Mindfulness Teacher Training. Jill ran the School for Compassionate Action, Mindfulness and Somatic Practices for those living with chronic pain, trauma and addictions for 11 years in New York City, and now she lives in California. So Jill, I'm thrilled to welcome you to the podcast today. It's fantastic to have you here. Just really delighted to meet you and to welcome you.
Thanks, Allison. I'm really happy to be here. We can talk about our favorite subjects.
Absolutely. All about embodiment is wonderful. So I wanted to start, my first question is really with your starting point. So what was it that sparked your own interest and dedication to understanding the mind and the body?
Pain, actually, a lot of pain. So I was in art school at the time in New York City, perfectly happy, living in my mind, in my creative mind. Didn't pay much attention to my body, didn't need to. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden had some pain that turned into chronic pain that was unremitting. Wow. And I went to various allopathic doctors at the time, all around New York City, the best that I could find. Nobody could find an organic reason for the pain. They would look at me and say, "You look fine." They ran a bunch of tests and said, "We can't find anything." And, I was a squeaky wheel. I didn't feel well. It really hurt. I kept going back. So over a period of a few years, especially being with a few doctors in particular over and over again, they started saying, we think it's in your mind. And I said, well, then what do I do about my mind? And this is back in the early 80s. And I got, some raised eyebrows, crossed eyes, shrugs, basically what amounted to a lot of pats on my shoulder. Mm-hmm. And sent away. And so I started to think, wow, what do I do about this mind that's registering all this pain? I had to drop out of school because I wasn't very well, and started on a path of trying to figure out, well, how do I work with my body? How can I improve how my body feels? And I started practicing yoga. That wasn't really helping. I mean, it was great in that it helped me with concentration. My body got very, very strong, very flexible. I took to it like a fish in water. But as far as helping with the pain, it didn't. Mm-hmm. I ended up having some surgeries. They took out various parts of my organs and glands. I was still in pain. I eventually convinced a surgeon to open me up again, and they found out that there actually was an organic reason for the discomfort, and it was part of my intestine had twisted and knotted and herniated my diaphragm and was living up by my heart. So it was actually, there was a real good reason for all the pain. This is 13 years in the making, before that was discovered. So after the surgery, they said, well, after recovery, and it was quite a brutal surgery, you'll be fine. And I wasn't. And I went to places like Yale Pain Clinic and kept trying to find reasons for the pain. And then really vowed to take care of myself and figure out this mind, even in my mind that was still registering all the pain and having trouble with the pain and feeling depressed about the pain. And I found myself on a retreat. I went to a 10-day silent retreat. The very first one I did was a Goanka Retreat. Very silent, very still, as some people know. A little bit brutal for me, who was used to moving and being active. But it was a pivotal turning point because I had to sit in the pain without moving, endlessly, going into my body. And then I had heard at the end of that retreat that there was another place nearby called IMS. And it was whispered to me basically that it was down the road, that there were different teachers, that some of them were psychologists, which piqued my interest because psychology has always been very interesting to me, that they actually had a yoga room and you could take walks in the woods, and that the food was really good. So I quickly wrote away for a pamphlet. I'm definitely dating myself. I got the pamphlet in the mail, and I went the very first chance I had. And it was just a 3-day retreat that was going to extend into a week-long, but I had only taken the time for the 3-day. Anyway, that's how I met my primary teacher. His name is Ajahn Amaro. He lives near you in London. He runs Amaravati Monastery. And I went and heard him and saw him, and it resonated with me in a way that nothing ever had. It wasn't just him and his heart and his beautiful smile and mind, but it was the teachings. It was the Buddhist teachings. And I knew I had found the right place for me to be. And then I started sitting on many retreats a year. I've sat hundreds by now, and it changed my life.
That's quite an extraordinary story, Jill, and I'm curious about this whole thing of 30. It took them 13 years to actually discover what was wrong. And I've got colleagues in the breath world who got chronic fatigue and ME and other things different to what you have, but again, this very dismissive attitude. I think by the medical profession, and that whole sense of being sent away. But in some ways, it sounds like perhaps in the end, I don't know if maybe there was some kind of gift in there for you, because that led you to finding this.
For me, it was a tremendous gift, because I was continually forced, which is a lot of what Dharma practice, Buddhist practice is, forced to go inside, to seek myself. How can I work with my mind? How can I work with my body? How do I work with the heart that's feeling, the pain of the pain, basically, the pain of the suffering, and to seek out my own direct experiences. So, I reached a point where I was being dismissed. I was being patronized. I looked okay. So of course there wasn't going to be anything wrong with me. I was happy in spite of it, which sounds a little odd, but some people probably know what I mean. And so I didn't fit into the ways in which one needs to qualify to be really taken seriously. And so I was forced to go and find my own answers. And to me, that was a gift. And I'm a little bit of a rebel and a renegade anyway. So when people were telling me you can't, I said, of course I can. And that really gave me the fodder that I needed to seek something that wasn't being told or taught in my regular culture, and world. And that was the portal that I needed. That plus imagination, I have to say, was very, very important and still is.
Tell me more about that, the imagination side of things.
Well, it was during these deep retreats, these long retreats, very, very silent, 10 days, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes a little longer, that my mind would get quite quiet. And I would have these experiences where I was almost like I was in a movie sometimes. I don't know how to quite describe it. These experiences, the mind is bizarre.
It sure is.
we start entering into it, and it's almost like a drug trip sometimes. Yeah, I have taken drug trips, so I knew that sort of the symbiotic relationship of them. But anyway, you're totally fine, you're straight, and your mind is opening, your heart is opening, your body is going along for that ride, and it can be quite interesting. And surreal. And so I would have experiences of being able to, see things changing as they were changing, almost like everything was shimmering and shifting and changing. I know. Please don't judge me.
Not at all. It sounds like some of the breathwork experiences I've had. So I'm definitely not judging you on it. I love those. It's a slightly altered state of consciousness.
Very altered states. And then it would happen in my body where I felt like I could I was diving into my body and I was able to look around. When I was young, Jacques Cousteau was on TV a lot, and he took his submarine down and he would go into the waters and with his little viewfinder, and he would see these magnificent views of fish and color and, amoebas and plankton and squids. Wow, look what's in there. And that's how I felt when I would drop into my body. It was like, wow, look in there and look in there. And sometimes it would be, quite trippy, but also sometimes it would be like, oh, well, I can spend a little time in there. And in particular with my gut, because that was the region of my body that was not working properly. I was told that area of my body was anthropomorphic, which is a really harsh thing to say to anyone. It means rock-like, or at least that's what I looked up in the dictionary at the time. I was really taken aback by that word. And when I looked at my body and I dove down in, that was a very dark place. So it had no color, it had no light. And I thought, well, maybe I need to bring back some color and some light and some movement in that area of my body. These things just came to me, I wasn't trying to make them happen. And so I would imagine, for instance, that my pelvis was this glass bowl. And I would picture, and this is where it was movie-like in a sense, it feels like you're superimposing an image, but it's coming to you quite naturally. And I imagined that I was placing all these flower petals at the bottom of the bowl. And I would try with my breath to swirl the petals around, because I was trying to breathe some life and color and movement back into my intestines. And I would say for a really long time, I couldn't picture any color at all. And my intestines weren't working. And I was told they weren't going to work again because it was part of the autonomic nervous system beyond what I could control.
Yeah.
But I had read that there were yogis and yoginis from long ago that had done these incredible things with their bodies and their minds. And I thought, well, if they did it, I'm going to try.
Cool. No, I think you're absolutely right. I love that.
What the heck? And so I kept doing it. I kept doing it, and so it's good to be stubborn, and it's good to be, a little bit rebellious and renegade. And I kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And finally one day I actually saw a few little petals flower, kind of moving around. And I thought, I'm healing.
That's amazing.
And it took about 7 years. Can't be precise about this, but I re-triggered peristalsis.
Wow.
Completely freaked out.
Phenomenal.
The doctors. I'm so proud of myself.
Wow.
Completely proud of myself. Now, I did this with imagination. I did this with a variety of different practices. So imagining that my intestines were going to move again, and I meticulously would go through them. But I imagined all sorts of things in my body. Some came to me and some I superimposed, like I was describing. But it was very transformational and still is. So imagination, I think, is really important because we need to imagine what we want to become. We need to imagine the world we want to live in. We need to imagine how we want to transform. And if we can be playful about it and imagine things that aren't boxed in or the way that we might have learned before, then literally the sky is the limit. And when we dive into the portal of mind and heart, we have faith in that. We know that this is true. There is no end to what we can do when we really work with our minds.
I properly love that. And I love this image of, you've got flowers on your blouse. And I love this image of the flowers in your intestine and kind of in the glass bowl, and also that you were using your breath, because actually the breath is the one part of the autonomic nervous system that we do have some control over.
That's right.
And being able to take that and to pair it with your imagination, I think is extraordinary.
Yes, and I've continued to do that, because then flash forward, I had 4 years ago, it happened a little bit before 4 years ago, but I had heart surgery. And I'd had a virus that attacked my one of my valves.
Wow.
And it burned it away, actually. And so practice showed up for me in incredible ways, because I was having heart failure for 2 years before I had the surgery. But the recovery process was really interesting because it was another opportunity for me at this point, because I've been practicing so long. Okay, so here we are. I don't like it, but this is my circumstance, one more time, learning through the body. This is what I have. And the recovery process was really beautiful in a sense, because it was painful. It was not fun, but I knew that my breath especially was what my heart needed to feel and hear.
Yeah.
And so I would ask the nurses to shut the door when I finally got, into a private room. And I spent hours and hours and hours just breathing lightly into my heart. And when I came home, I did the same thing. And I was so grateful to know the breath as a friend and as an ally and as a transformational property that I didn't question at all. That it was there for me, and it was really a big difference. And yeah, so I'm a firm believer.
Yeah. And just, I think it's fascinating seeing how you've carried that with you right from the beginning of your journey through to even now, but also that sense of accepting what's the opportunity that what can I learn from here? I may not like the circumstances I'm in.
Right.
We're in a crazy world at the moment. We don't like the circumstances we're in.
Oh, and you don't have to.
Absolutely, but we can use it as an opportunity to learn. And I love that approach to kind of think about, well, okay, let's work with what I've got.
Right, exactly. I've had the great fortune also of hanging around with a lot of either close to enlightened or enlightened beings, I don't know. But especially some of the Tibetan teachers that I've had. When I was living in New York, they would come and stay with me. They weren't so known in the United States yet. And so they would stay with me, and I had these, lofts, and they'd stay with me for weeks at a time. I didn't realize how amazing that was at the time. I mean, I sort of did, but in hindsight, I really know now, because they've become very well known. And I would just watch how they were in general. They asked me to treat them like family, and so I wasn't asking them a lot of questions and, trying to get practices for myself all the time. But, it was a fairly casual, familial relationship that we had. And I would see that anything was fodder for practice for them. So I would like sweat it out, getting them to, the teachings on time, literally like, oh no, we're late. And they were like, it's okay. It's all right. It's all right. And we'd get out of the taxi, and there were people waiting for them. Rinpoche, so happy to see you. And they were like, hi. And then everything was fine. And over a period of some years of this, I was like, yeah, why am I sweating it? Things are going to turn out as they're going to turn out.
Yeah.
So it was being with them and just sitting in the fire of my own heart, mind, body. And, for a very long periods of time, that eventually I relaxed. It does rub away the jagged edges of the stone eventually.
What do they say? You're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So I guess
so choose your friends. That's right.
Wisely, absolutely.
Exactly.
Really choose your friends wisely.
That's right.
Definitely. Fantastic. I love it. So you've been practicing Buddhism for over 35 years now. So I'm curious to know how has your practice of mindfulness and meditation evolved over that time? How has it been informed by all these amazing experiences that you've had?
I think primarily it's, at this point, I've developed faith in my own wisdom and direct experiences. In the beginning, it was about forming a relationship with myself for me, because I didn't have a very good or very kind relationship with myself in general. I liked myself okay, but it was just okay. And then I had a body that really was uncomfortable. So I sat, quite a few years in intense pain.
Yeah.
And so I didn't like my body so much. My body felt like it had betrayed me. So there was this it was very obvious. I was very self-critical. I had kind of gotten that naturally through my family. Thank you very much. I had great parents, but they taught me how to be a good critic of myself and others. So that was very apparent when I started to hear my own thoughts, very apparent. So it was really obvious to me in the beginning that, wow, I'm not very kind to myself, not very kind to my body. And maybe I need to redevelop a relationship, or maybe that is even a possibility, that was introduced to me, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
And then hearing about compassion, that compassion can be cultivated. I was like, wow, well, if the Buddha actually said that, then there's hope for me, because that means that there are other people that he was saying the same thing to when he was alive. So that gave me a lot of hope. Okay, so if it can be cultivated, then I'm going to try. And so for many, I would say probably 2 decades, I cultivated self-kindness and compassion and a better relationship with my own body, my own heart, and my own mind. So in the beginning, that's more what it was about. And just having a relationship between the body, between the mind, between the heart was really important, because mine were very disconnected, as I think a lot of ours are.
My entire background's in the corporate world, and I would say that I spent years entirely in my head, and it's only in the last several years with the breathwork, the embodiment, that I've actually gone, oh, there's something else going on here.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Really common experience.
Right. Yeah. So that's kind of like, I think most of us start out and we see and hear and feel things that, like, wow, it's going loud in there, or it's not, if we were a conductor in the orchestra, we'd say, we're going to try this again. It's not quite working. A little discordant here. So but the good news is that if we try again, which we can as long as we're breathing, then we can rediscover, redevelop. Our capacity grows for anything that we do over and over again.
Yeah.
So, but now it's different, because I've spent that time, and wasn't always fun and wasn't always easy. But I stuck with it, and now I do have faith in myself, and I'm continually curious about what awareness is, what consciousness is, what I might be able to do with my own mind and body and heart. So it's a continual discovery, and I don't take it all so personally.
So you feel you can get a bit of distance between what's going on, or when you say you don't take
perspective, I would say.
Perspective.
So my approach changed over the years. My approach now is I learned to be kind and like myself. I spent a few years just doing a lot of self-retreat to develop a little relationship with myself that was kind. Actually, I was in London for part of it, in south of France, completely alone and trying to find home. Where is home? And I needed to find it in my heart. But it was it was just a sort of that, at this point, the kindness evolved into compassion. I actually really like myself now, because I don't blame myself for what's going on. Some things I take responsibility for, of course, but I don't own every thought that goes through my mind and blame myself for what I might be feeling. But I hold it, I approach it differently. again, with some kind curiosity.
And
I mean, we're all just really interesting expressions of being human. So that's what's interesting to me now.
And I think many of the people I work with, and I think it's a really common experience of not really liking yourself, or kind of
Very common.
like, I don't really like myself. I don't
Painful.
like the way I'm thinking. I don't like who I am. How all of these things. So I guess I'm curious if you've got any suggestions to anyone as to perhaps from your own practices, from things that you learned along the way that you would suggest to people if they want to be a bit more self-kind, self-compassionate. What would you suggest? Where might they start?
Well, first of all, by getting some guidance, I think, is really important so that you don't feel that you're on this path or journey alone. Yeah. Is to find somebody that's been doing something a lot longer than you, who has made a lot of mistakes along the way. And ask someone, a teacher, a mentor, or even join a group of a community of people, and sit and practice with others. It could be individually or with a group. Unfortunately now there are a lot of things online that we can join into, so that if a teacher or a mentor isn't close to you in proximity to where you live, you can get, via internet, you can join with anybody really. So I think that that's important, is to not try to reinvent any wheels necessarily, or try to do everything on your own, because we don't do everything on our own. We need to support each other. So finding someone that can help is really important. Mm-hmm. And then to know that whatever we repeat, we become. And that's good news and not so good news sometimes, So
indeed.
Right. So we know this from neurobiology, that patterns become grooved over time. So we think something over and over again, then it's in the brain, and we can overlay and we can change. And so that's important to remember, so that having some sort of persistence is really helpful. Now, again, that's where we need each other to get support, because we'll fall off the wagon or forget or get discouraged, and somebody else can help us. I don't know that I would have done everything I did without my teachers. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe part of it, sure, but not maybe. I don't think all of it.
Well, they certainly point us in different directions, and I think,
for
me, certainly, there's something about feeling that I'm not alone with whatever the heck it is that I'm trying to work through, that actually this is a shared human condition and other people have been there or are going through it. So, yeah.
And you're not crazy.
Well, maybe a bit.
Well, you have to be somewhat slightly good crazy.
Good crazy.
Think out of the box. I mean, look, most of us go along life thinking it's got to be like this and this and this. It doesn't.
No.
I am here to say my life's looked nothing like what my parents wanted it to look like. And they were okay with that, fortunately. It doesn't have to look like what we've been taught necessarily. And that restrictive thinking is what keeps us down.
Yeah.
And especially right now, with everything that's going on, the pandemic of COVID, the unconscious bias, the racism pandemic, we need to reevaluate and examine our own consciousness and unconsciousness. In fact, I dreamt about that the other night. How do you bring the unconscious forward? This is part of our practice, so that we see where we cause ourselves harm, and we're slowly letting go of those ways, because we can. Yeah,
definitely amazing things to think about here. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the School for Compassionate Action, as we were talking about compassion, and really what was your sort of the idea, the mission behind that, what benefits did it bring? And then I'm wondering if maybe after that we can perhaps have a little practice of an embodied compassion exercise ourselves, just so people can get a bit of a
Sure.
sense of it for themselves. But tell us a bit more about the school festival.
Well, when I moved back to New York City in 2001, I actually moved in, or tried to move in on 9/11. It's a pretty interesting day,
Yeah.
as we all know. And there was a time I was living outside the city for a little while, and I thought, well, should I move back in? And I decided, yes, if any city needed what I thought I could offer, it was New York, so I was going to go. So I moved back in October, or end of September of that year. And part of the reason that I wanted to be in New York was because there were a lot of different communities, a lot of different kinds of people. I mean, it's like any urban setting, but New York is particularly ripe with this. There are people from all over the world are living there, and from all kinds of backgrounds. And I wanted to see if I could fill in some holes or gaps of where I thought people could benefit from practices, somatic practices like breathing, or imaginal practices like I've described, or mindfulness practices, meditation practices, who didn't know about a Dharma center, who wouldn't be caught dead in a yoga studio, who just didn't even have that in their awareness at all, but maybe could benefit from these kinds of practices. So I went back in and I started the organization. It was a nonprofit, and I created some relationships with different organizations, like a hospital in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, which was mostly immigrant populated, very underserved, very, underfunded hospital. And I went to them and I said, I have these practices. I know they work. I've used them on myself. I've been training people to do these things for almost 2 decades by now. Would you be interested in having me teach some classes? And while I'm teaching, some of my students that are going to be in training with me can sit in. And the psychologist, because it was in the behavioral department where they said yes, the psychologist can sit in as well if you like. And they said yes, and that we had to do it on the sly because it wasn't approved at the time. This is, I shouldn't say that, but anyway, we sort of snuck it in, and this went on for 10 years. And then I was teaching groups of people with chronic pain, with addictions, with trauma, comorbid, issues, young girls that were cutters. I mean, it was pretty intense. And we had the very first group of 9/11 responders at the hospital. So we were doing that kind of work. And honestly, it was a little bit seat of my pants at the time because I hadn't been trained to do this particular work. There were no trainings to do that kind of particular work.
You brought a lived experience, that lived embodied experience.
I had that.
In it yourself.
Exactly. I had that. So, I went on a wing and a prayer and a little bit of chutzpah. And, I did the same thing at a place called Roosevelt Addiction Institute, which was a 28-day rehab for, people that was kind of their last stop before prison or jail. And worked in a lot of after-school programs in lockdown places for at-risk kids. And so it was a service organization, but it was also a training, because I was, I created trainings, and then I would have people come along and they could assist or watch or observe and learn in these different communities. It did quite well, not financially. It's never been my strong suit, but it did quite well in terms of helping people and training a lot of people.
Yeah. So what do you have any stories you can share of the differences you saw in people? Was there anything that struck you in particular, or was it?
There were a lot of differences that sometimes people wouldn't admit. So for instance, there was a woman in one of the groups in the hospital, and she was struggling. She was in a lot of pain. Yeah. She was still heavily addicted to painkillers, and who could blame her? And wasn't happy. You know, I mean, this can happen when you're not feeling well for a really long time. You're not necessarily the easiest person to be around.
No, absolutely.
And she would come into the room and she hobbled in on a cane. And she was sort of, you know, hunched and crippled by her pain, sat in the back, didn't want to get involved. You would ask her something, she was really kind of grouchy. But, you know, she came, she kept showing up. She would come every other week. The classes were every other week. And one day, you know, and I was sort of, after a while, I had a relationship with her. I, you know, kind of lightly tease her and try to engage and, you know, get her to engage. And she would kind of bat me off. And that was fine. That was our relationship in a sense. But one day she walked out and we saw her cane in the corner.
Oh, wow.
And we thought, oh, that's interesting, because she never had come in without her cane and she really relied on it.
Yeah.
And sure enough, about 5-10 minutes later, she came back in and she kind of was embarrassed.
That's extraordinary.
But something was working for her.
Yeah.
So I had lots of stories like that of, you know, sometimes people didn't want to admit that something was helping, or that they were practicing.
Yeah, she kept coming back. So something.
She was internalizing it.
Yeah.
And that happened a lot.
Yeah.
That would happen a lot, where it wasn't, you know, especially people that thought they were kind of tough, or that this sounded like, well, not for me. They would still show up and it was going in. Maybe not in the ways that anybody could see or that what we would expect.
Yeah.
But the tenacity and the resiliency was there.
So powerful. Extraordinary.
Beautiful and heartwarming. And so I never, you know, after a while, I didn't expect anybody to really show me ways. Some people did. Some people were very vocal.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times people were very quiet. And it still was helping them.
I love this sense of, I guess, allowing or accepting that I get from you. You've mentioned it before and it's coming up again, this whole sense of it's just, I don't have to make it in a particular way. I'm just going to let it be how it is. And I think that sounds incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I think thank you. And I think there's tremendous permission in that, which we don't generally give ourselves. I mean, for instance, anybody that's been ill often isn't shown how to be okay with it. We think, what do you mean okay with it? You know, I hate my pain, or the doctor screwed me up, or they're patronizing me, or they're, you know, dismissing me. So what do you mean be okay? Well, let's be okay in your own heart. And also when people are telling us this is wrong, this is right, you can do this, you can't, or you can't do this, we have to say, who says?
Yeah.
Who says? Because there's so many stories like mine. So many people have really interesting, bizarre, unusual stories. We need to hear these stories because they give us hope. And so we don't know how things are going to look necessarily. And if we think we know, that's the operative word, think. We really have no idea.
For ourselves, isn't it?
Exactly.
We're creating that box and disempowering ourselves through doing
That's exactly right. So thinking outside noticing what your own box is, we usually have many, is probably, it sounds like bad news in the beginning, but it's excellent news. Because when we see how we're being held back by our beliefs, then this is where we need some help, you know, like, well, how do I loosen the grip of that? How do I break it down? How do I blow it down? How do I paint it away? You know, whatever it is, but to really experiment, because that's where the freedom is.
It is, absolutely, because the key is if we can't see the box, if we're not aware of it, if that's just how life is, we're never going to be able to make a change. We can't get rid of it. We're just too stuck in it. Yeah.
And everybody has their own experience, so we can't say this is going to feel good, this is going to be like this. I learned that the hard way through taking many yoga classes, where people would say, oh, well, this pose is going to make you happier, and this pose is going to heal your heart. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? No, that's not true. That's not helpful. To name somebody else's experiences, that's not helpful. We don't know.
So let's perhaps it's a good moment just to talk about the yoga, and we'll come back to the practice in a moment, because I'm curious now you've raised that kind of experience around yoga. You said you did it for a long time. You found it helpful in some ways, but not in others. But tell me a bit more about how you see these kinds of practices and maybe the world of that fitting into your way of thinking about embodiment.
Well, one of the reasons I was able to do so many retreats is because I did it in exchange. And so at one point, after I gotten to know Ajahn Amaro a little bit, I said, I see people sitting with a lot of discomfort in their body, and their posture is really not so great. What would you think if I offered just a few stretches that might help people to sit better, so that they're not just focused on the discomfort of the body, but that they can really dive in, to the mind and the heart? And he said, sure, why not? And so we were the first people to bring any kind of movement on a silent retreat at Spirit Rock Meditation Center and at Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts and California. And I have to say that it wasn't, so, it was different. Let's say that. Here's and seriously, I don't take myself that seriously, because here's the white blonde with the monk coming in to do some movement. I was calling it movement back then. I wasn't even calling it yoga. And we eventually morphed it into mindful movement or meditation in motion. But some of the, some people would look at us like this, like, this is entertainment. Why is this part of the retreat? We should just be sitting still, not fully recognizing some of the benefits of being able to drop into the body and to develop this relationship between heart, mind, and body. So that's how I started teaching on retreats, because I was practicing on retreat, and it completely changed my yoga practice. I would take a pose and I would stay in it for 20, 30 minutes. Now, not a really difficult pose, because when you're doing a really challenging pose, there's a lot of work involved in that, right? But if you stay in a pose that's relatively easy, like a restorative even, you can stay in it for a long time, and then you can investigate, because the poses open up parts of the body that you may not have accessed just sitting still. And it gives you an excuse or a reason to go in this little room or down in that little pocket, and you investigate it in with your kind awareness, with your attention. And so that's what I was experimenting with, and that's how I taught it. And that's, really radically changed how I practiced yoga and thought about it. But also, there was a time I was teaching one of my Tibetan teachers yoga, and he had never done yoga before. So this was quite interesting. And we'd go into a room, and it was just him and I would teach him some things. And he said, at one point, after a few years, he would always ask me, do you have any questions for me? And I'd say, no, Rinpoche, this time's for you. But one time he said, no, let's go sit down. I want to ask you about how you healed. So he asked me to describe what I did and how it felt. And he said, can you do it now? And I closed my eyes and I did it. I was moving energy. Again, please don't judge me. But I was moving some energy in my body. And he said, oh, I know what you mean. This is great. He goes, that's bliss.
Like, wow.
Bliss? He said, yes, that's just mind. You have to teach that. I said, well, I'm not sure I'm ready to teach this. So he encouraged me over the years. But the other thing that he did was he pulled up his sleeve. And he would always tease me, because I'd say, breathe into your kidneys, breathe into your liver. And he'd say, Jill says, breathe into your kidneys. he actually ended up teaching that kind of thing after. But anyway, he pulls up
combat, yes.
he said, let me show you. I know exactly about moving, energy. And he rolls up his sleeve and he starts to point at his arm. And as he's pointing at the arm, and I can do this partially, you can't see it online, and as he's pointing, the hair and the goosebumps lift up.
Yeah.
But so I can do that part now. But the bizarre part was that when his finger would leave a particular part of his skin, the hair and the goosebumps would go back down. I was like,
wow.
I have a lot to learn here. It blew my mind. And that's exactly what you want.
Yeah.
I think you want your mind to be blown, because there are no boxes in a blown mind.
Absolutely.
Now, a blown mind might last just a couple of seconds. And then we go back to the relative world, we put the boxes back on, so to speak, sometimes, or just to a certain extent. But at any rate, that's what radically changed the way I looked at moving energy and things. And then I started to study it a little bit, especially from the Tibetan traditions. I mean, there's a lot, the Thai Theravadins. I mean, everybody's got more secret practices or internal practices. And I came to find out that my experiences that I was having on retreat weren't just mine. And that was the good news. I didn't make them up. They were quite similar to how other people would try to write about them over the centuries. So a lot of practices were whispered, they were whispered from one breath to another's ears. And I sometimes have felt the warm breath on my ear. So there's a lot that we don't know about and a lot that we discount. And I'm happy to be teaching about this now, because why not? I think it's helpful.
I think it's really helpful. Absolutely. And I love this idea of coming into a pose and sitting with it. It's almost really getting into it's kind of something to do with the psychology behind it. So it's like, when I'm in this pose, what is happening? What's happening to my brain, my thinking, what's happening to my body? What do I suddenly become aware of that I wasn't aware of previously? What am I noticing?
That's right.
Really.
That's right. And the body, it turns, for me, the body is this house that I could investigate different rooms and know, oh, well, I stashed this down here from when I was a kid, or my grandparents are up here, and I would investigate in that way.
Yeah.
And I could ask, I could, clean out, I could give away, I could say, okay, time for you to go, come back another time, so I just was able to use that for inquiry and to work with what was, because the body is storing memory all the time, and the body is sensing a thought and an emotion before it's actually cognized. And if something's not cognized, it doesn't just magically disappear.
No, it stays.
It goes in, and we know this from trauma work now, right?
Yeah.
And so it's, investigating the body, I think, is key to understanding the mind and heart more. It's not just through talking, as you and I have briefly said.
No, definitely not.
Talking is about the story, which is important. We need to do this. This is not a replacement, but it's additionally. Yeah. There's the wordless body, the body that has its own language, that's, in a sense, deeper than thought.
Well, it's a different kind of intelligence, I think.
That's exactly right.
It brings us something, and it gives us a depth and a richness of experience.
That's right. Exactly.
That's what I see.
So in order to be our full selves, we need to approach both, or all of our facets.
Absolutely. Wonderful. So shall we do is there a embodied compassion practice you can share with us? Something just for people to try if they'd like to have an inquiry around this themselves?
Sure. So however you're sitting, or if you're lying down, just see if you can let go of having to assume any particular kind of posture. Let your body rest without falling apart, but just rest the body. and sense the chair or the cushion or the bed or the floor, whatever that is supporting you, just sense it wherever your body is touching it. Allow your bones to recognize their weight. Allow the soft tissue of your body to give in to the weight of your bones. And do just what they're meant to, be soft. And turn your attention towards your body in more of a landscape view. And just notice how it feels. As if you're looking upon this vast territory of body, from feet to hands to head, just getting an overall sense. And then turn your attention towards your heart and look at the landscape of your heart. Again, as if you could notice what's in the heart, not necessarily in story form, but just to notice the heart and what it's holding. As if you were gazing upon it with kind eyes. And then to notice the same with your mind, as if you're gazing over the vast landscape of your mind. Looking out, noticing what it's containing. Not why, but just noticing. Do we have the landscape of our body, the internal landscape of our heart or our emotional body, and then the internal landscape of mind or mental body? And sometimes one of those bodies, or all three, might become a little tight and holding back or constricted for a variety of sometimes very good reasons. And the constriction or the tightness might keep us back from being who we really are and who we really want to be. So how do we procure or cultivate a little bit more room for ourselves, a little bit more space to be a little bit more free? Try taking your breath in just a little bit more deeply. Keep it very, very tender and very soft, very delicate. But see if you can increase your inhale and bring it to a place in your body or your heart or even into your mind where you'd like to have just a little bit more softness and space. Then we're slowly increasing the capacity of breath and we're moving it somewhere consciously and in particular, someplace in the body, maybe right into the heart or maybe the mind. It's as if you're blowing up a balloon where the skin of the balloon just sort of gives and gives and gives with the breath that's being blown into it. And then begin to exhale just a little bit more completely. See if you can follow the exhale all the way out. And the exhale is now making room, making space to bring the next inhale in. But it's also a way to let go. So whether you're bringing it someplace into your body, heart, or mind, see if you can let the exhale be a time to let go of something and picture it leaving as best you can. To the inhale is bringing in some space, some softness. Exhale is a little bit more about letting go. And then providing the space to bring the breath in again. And if you like now, you can call upon the elements of nature to support your practice, to support you. Imagining your favorite place in nature, whether it be the beach or forest, maybe the mountains, maybe a meadow, or maybe you picture yourself floating on a cloud. And you allow your breath to be coming in from that particular environment. So it's carrying all the nutrients of the sky, the ocean, the rich forest, meadow with flowers, whatever delights you. Do we breathe in all the properties, all the support from nature, and we pause for one moment, wherever you're bringing the breath, and just hold it for a second. Let it be a little bit more absorbed, and then release, allowing that exhale to be full and complete, carrying out as if you're opening rooms in your body, your heart, your mind, and you're allowing a cross breeze to come in and refresh the breeze from some beautiful place. So you inhale and just pause for a moment. Allow yourself to absorb the nutrition, the restorative properties. And then exhale completely. And then pause for a moment after the exhale and just give your body a complete rest. So we're focusing on the 4 different qualities of breath. Bringing in, rejuvenating with the inhale, pausing and absorbing, letting go, releasing and getting more space with the exhale, and then pausing and deeply resting. And now, if you like, you can bring in a very dear friend into the space that you're making and into partake in the breeze, in the wind, in the air, in this beautiful place that you're procuring. You can bring a friend in if you like, because you've created a little bit more room and you want to share. And how does it feel to invite a friend? It could be a human being, an animal being, an unseen being, a being with roots. It doesn't really matter, but invite someone or something that you love just to partake a little bit in this fresh breeze, the space that you're creating for yourself and for them. And notice how that feels if you've invited someone or something inside. Notice where you feel it and how you feel it. And then allow whatever it is that you're envisioning to slowly, slowly fade. Your friend, your imaginary being, your plant being, whatever it is, whomever it is that you've invited, if you have, is now going to leave happier. And your breath slowly comes back to being whatever it is. Just refinding the natural expression of breath somewhere and noticing what it feels like. What is this breath? What does it feel like now? And then whenever you're ready, allow your eyes to slowly open and see if you can keep your gaze really soft. as if everything that you're seeing is just very, very gently coming back into view. Like you haven't really seen it before and you're not really knowing exactly what's going on, but just taking in form and light and shape and color and being very aware, if you can, of what's going on internally still, like even registering where you're sensing your breath. Or if you were able in that very short practice to create a little bit of space, what does that feel like? What is that sense? And if we can do this with our eyes opened, especially if you're looking at a screen, it's helpful because then we can be looking out and we can be knowing what's going on inside at the same time. So we don't lose ourselves in just looking out, but we're internally aware as we're aware of what's going on in life, but with a different sense.
That was deeply lovely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love that. I can feel this, as you said, this complete sense of expansion, even with the screen in front of me. Just
excellent.
Being able to observe that, see that, and enjoy that, but also this sense of space in the room and much more spaciousness certainly in my chest. I don't know how it will feel for other people, but that was
right.
Very kind and gentle. Thank you for sharing that, Jill.
You're very welcome. I mean, the space
is
how
we now.
I'm sorry.
We just contemplate that. It's beautiful.
Good. Yeah. I mean, the room, we all feel a little hemmed in by thoughts or feelings or just the body. And so some form of space is helpful because kindness and compassion is soft and spacious. So how do we procure it? There's lots of different ways.
Yeah.
I just happen to like to do it in the body.
Yeah. It's lovely doing it in the body. And I think that the idea of also sharing that with somebody else, bringing someone else in, felt really, just gentle and compassionate in itself. Just that whole feeling of actually there's enough to go around for everybody. We don't have to grasp it. It's back to that sense of allowing again.
There's room for lots of people if you keep doing it. Lots of beings, let's say.
Thank you. That was lovely. Oh, so we're kind of coming towards the end of our time. Actually, it's gone incredibly quickly. I don't quite know where that time went. I really enjoyed that, but I wanted to ask you, I guess, a couple of things. Firstly, if people want to find out more about what you're doing and if there's, where's the best place for them to find you online?
I have a website. It's jillsatterfield.org. It's not .com, it's .org. I couldn't get my name, so org is fine. I like to expand. So everything I do is posted on there, and I do a lot of writing. That's most of it is up there, and I try to get around but not be overbearing. So yeah, best place is to find me there.
Perfect. And do you have any last thoughts, anything else you'd like to share with us, anything for the future, anything else you'd like to share just before we wind things up, Jill?
We are never truly alone. There is always support if we seek it, and that the heart, mind, and body have potential that we haven't realized or recognized yet. So we need each other to continue to create this huge wave of direct experience so that we can really shift and change the way we are with ourselves and each other in the world.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I've really loved our chat and actually could probably keep talking to you for the rest of the evening.
Well, we'll have to sign in another time.
Thank you very much. It was just great.
Thank you. Okay, take good care.